Hey everyone, welcome. My name is ARTFX. I want to do another video today about snare drums. I know the last video in this series I did a video about making snare drums from scratch using synthesis with extra record serum. Today I want to do this again because I've been working on a snare drum sample pack at the moment, and I've basically learned a lot while doing this, and I just want to do sort of like a follow-up video where we go a little bit more in depth. So I know the previous one was already in-depth, but this one is going to be a little bit more in-depth. I'm going to show you not necessarily just how I would make a snare drum. I'm also going to show you how I would set up a template that would allow me to make a whole variety of snare drums in a very quick way. For instance, when you're making a sample pack. So if you want to get into making sample packs, then this would probably be a good video for you to watch. Or if you just want to, make more samples for your own music more quickly, then this would be a good thing to, to watch. So, let's get started with what we're gonna do. So, I want to make a bunch of drum and bass snares. I'm probably gonna show you a couple of different things that you can do, and a couple of different methods that we're gonna explore. We're mostly gonna work a lot with layering today. So the first thing, I want to use Addictive Drums today. I also want to use some samples. So in case you don't have Addictive Drums, then the sample part will come in handy for you. And we will do a little bit of synthesis as well at the same time. So I have a completely blank project. I'm just going to make sure that there's nothing on the master that's doing any processing. So the limiter is gone. This right here is just for me to be able to check the mids and the sides and just the full stereo signal. I also have a little resampling track here. That's just a regular resampling track, so it's just an audio track set to resampling so that we can use that to record audio. I'm gonna take a 2-bar section and I'm gonna loop that. And that is going to be where we're going to make our snare. So let's get started with a MIDI track, because we're going to need a MIDI track for the fundamental. So I'm just going to call that fundamental. And it might even be good to call this fundamental 1. And let's group that. And we're just going to have a group called fundamentals. So that's just going to be where our fundamental oscillators are going to be. So next up, I also want to have another MIDI track, and for this I want to have basically, this is going to be our noise tail. So let me rename this one to noise tail 1, and again I'm just going to group that, and I'm just going to call that noise tails, something like that. And then I'm going to create one more track here, another MIDI track. Let's group that. Let's call that tails. That's going to be where the rest of the sounds are going to be. So I'm going to give these let's give them a color. So let's do fundamentals in that one. Let's do that. Let's do that. There we go. So there's a couple of things we want to have, so I'm going to call this one Addictive Drums 2, just for the time being. So there's a couple of things we want to do. First, you want to, it kind of depends on how you're going to make these snares. Now, if you're going to do this separate from working on a track, so if you're just going to do a session where you're just going to make snare drums, or you could apply this to kick drums or any kind of drum sound or any other type of sound, to be quite honest. But if you're going to do that separate from making a track, I would set up my project like this. I would just basically just set it up in a way where I have a really nicely organized template that I can use to then basically just make a whole bunch more variations on the same drum sound that I made basically at the end when we're done with this. If you're doing this in a track, then I would probably do it a little bit different. I would really just do it whatever works best for the track, which might not be doing it like this, right? You might not need these extra groups. You might just be able to just put it all inside one group and just call that your snare group, for instance. But for the sake of making a sample pack and actually, doing these kind of things, it's nice to have them separate. Honestly, I would maybe even group these two together. So let's group the Addictive Drums in there. And I'm gonna use this group just for extra like audio layers. So I'm just gonna create an audio track in here. I'm gonna drag this one in here as well. Okay, there we go. Let's call that Addictive Drums 2 Till, and this is just gonna be our tills. So basically just the till of the drum sounds, and this is gonna be extra samples that we're gonna use. Let's just call this audio. That's gonna all gonna be audio tracks. So let's get started with the fundamental. So obviously we're first gonna need to pick something to make the fundamental with. I'm not gonna get too carried away right now making the fundamental itself. I'm just gonna set up a fundamental that is simple, not too complicated. And I'm gonna do it with Serum again, because I just like using Serum for drums. So I'm gonna use this. By the way, at the top we have something new called mini meters. I'll leave a link to that in the description below this video. It's called mini meters, and it's basically my new replacement for what once was Wave Candy by ImageLine. This works a lot better, and it will show us everything in meters here along the top, and you'll see that in just a bit. So we're going to start off with the fundamental. Now, for the fundamental, I have a wavetable for this, but I'm going to show you how to make it. So, a snare drum is most of the time going to use a sine wave or a rounded sort of like square wave. We're first bringing the phase and the random phase all the way down because we want this to be re-triggering properly. So let's do that, and let's just do this. And I'm gonna go and I want to load up a sine wave in here, so I'm just gonna go and do singles, and we're just gonna do sine, and it's gonna give us this. And the only thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring this down so that it's like that. Now I want to create an additional wavetable or an additional waveform here that looks a bit more like a rounded square. So we can achieve that by going in here into the bins. And I'm going to take bin number 3. I'm going to bring this up a bit. And we want to get this kind of a shape. So you want to have this sort of like dip in the middle. And then we're going to bring up bin number 5. And you'll see, while we do that, that dip kind of disappears. Now we might get another dip, as you can see. So that's something that we might want to work with. There is one thing we could do here, by the way, and that is just doing it like this. So we're just going to dial that in so it's as square as possible with only adding one extra one, like that. And let's add another one. And now we're going to do a little bit more here. So we want to have a dip. And then we're going to bring up that one. And we want to tweak these a little bit so that it's again as square as possible. So you might just have to go back and forth and change them a little bit. That's pretty solid, to be honest. And let's do one more. So let's do another plus. And now we want to have one more. So I'm going to increase this one. And you can see we want to basically, this peak that starts showing here in the middle, it's very subtle right now. We want to get that at the same height as the ones on the outside there, so that they're basically similar. Kind of like that. That looks pretty similar. And then we want to raise bin number 7, which is then going to fill up these little gaps right there. And you can see, as we do this, we start getting more and more closer to an actual square wave. Okay, so now it's pretty close. There's a little dip in the middle, so I'm going to try raising bin number 3, I think. That was actually not the right one. We needed to raise... Okay, that's closer. Bin number 5. And you can see we start seeing these again. So let's raise bin number 7. It's very you can probably do this in a different way. You can achieve a very similar result probably by using the process filters on a square wave, but if you learn how to do this properly, you can get it basically exact in here, and all you want is, yeah, that's pretty good. So that's pretty much a rounded square. So now we have 4 of these. I'm going to select all 4 of them, or I don't even think that's needed. We can just have it like that. I want to do process, and I'm going to say normalize each gained separately. So it's basically going to take the maximum possible gain. And you can see now that all of these are extending all the way up to the top. And next thing we want to do is we want to do a morph and then a crossfade. So we get all the frames that are in between, and it's basically just now going to crossfade between that pure sine wave and that rounded square wave. And you can see that the harmonics actually come in nicely one by one as well and when we do that. So we're basically done with making the wavetable. And this is the wavetable that I would use for probably 90% or maybe even 95% of my snare drums. Because a lot of times when you have a snare drum and you hear the fundamental, a lot of times it has that woody kind of tone to it. So that's a sine wave. But as soon as we add that rounded square and I play short notes, you can hear it already starts getting a bit of that sort of like snare drum kind of character. Now, we have a lot because we can go all the way up to here. So that would be for a really saturated kind of snare. And the beautiful thing of this is that because we're not doing it with distortion, we're not doing it with saturation, we're doing it at the oscillator level, and that way it's going to be a lot cleaner. We don't have to distort the snare as much to get the same kind of result on that fundamental. You could achieve the same thing by just taking a sine wave and then just slamming that through some compression and some saturation, and you would get a very similar result. But I find this works a little bit better. So next up, we need an envelope. So I'm going to take the level. I'm going to bring it all the way down. And I'm going to take LFO number 1. And we're going to create a shape like this and put it on the level. So we need to make sure that this is set to envelope. So I'm just going to turn that into an envelope. And I'm also going to unlink the BPM here. So we're just going to have basically just a free running kind of thing. So we have hertz values instead of the synced values. And we want to basically just listen to this and kind of hear to what it's doing. So let's go in here. Let's create a MIDI note. And we want to think about what pitch we're going to do. So should we do a snare drum in B? I think B could be a cool one. So let's do, is that B? Which B is that? 2? Yeah, it's B2. Okay. So let's do B2, which I think is actually not B2 in real life. I think it's actually B4 or B3. I'm not entirely sure. Ableton is weird with that. There's not a standard for that. It's a whole nother thing, but whatever sounds like that in your DAW if you don't use Ableton. So now we basically already have our fundamental tone. And it's a little bit long, so we can use this to determine how quick it's going to be. And we're going to come back to this later on. So we're probably going to be a lot more like that. That already sounds a lot like a snare fundamental. So we need more on that. We need a pitch envelope and more stuff. But right now, I think would be a good moment to start looking for the Addictive Drums layer. So I'm going to take Addictive Drums, and we're just going to load up Addictive Drums. And by default, my Addictive Drums loads up with the initialized preset, which is basically an empty kit, like this. If yours doesn't do that, then just go into the preset browser, and there should be, all the way at the top, should be a preset called Initialize. And just click that, and it's basically just an empty kit. So all I need here is I need a snare drum, and we don't need anything else, so I'm literally just going to go and pick a snare drum, and that's what we're going to use. I'm also going to bring the overheads down. I think we might use the room, so I'll leave that in for now. but I don't think we'll use the overheads. It's best to keep these quite simple at this stage, because we're going to use quite a bit of processing, and this layer is not really going to supply that much to the final snare. It's really just going to take care of the resonance. So this is also why I do this now, because I want to basically find a resonance that sounds interesting, and then I can build the entire rest of the sort of like snare drum around that, which the fundamental I already made, but that's so that I can hear what the fundamental is going to sound like in terms of pitch, in this case B. And if I then look for, you know, a resonance, then I can basically look for something that sounds interesting with that fundamental. So let's go in here. So we can hear already, has some nice resonance. That a little bit less, right? So that one has good resonance as well. A bit more lower. Has a good resonance. And we can change the resonance as well, of course. Pro reference is pretty good. That one has quite a bit of resonance as well. That one has a resonance, but it's a lot shorter. Let's go with one of those first ones. We can always take a different one again. I think that one could be pretty cool, the Pearl Masterwork. So let's use that one. And I'm gonna open this up. And first thing I want to do is I want to bring this one down here. And let's find the right MIDI note. So we need to go down. So we have a couple of options. That one has a lot of resonance, so that might be a pretty good one to use. Either that one or that one. I think I'm gonna use that one. So I'm just gonna do it at the full velocity. I'm not really too worried about what velocity I'm putting in here, even though some of those might sound a lot better. I'm just leaving it at the full velocity, and the reason is that we can actually do that in here. So we can basically just tell it exactly which sample it's going to use in this panel right here, so we don't even need to do it there. And the upside of that is that it's not going to get any quieter in level. We're literally just going to get the loudest possible volume coming out of that sample, but we're just going to tell it which sample we want it to use. We don't need this, and we're gonna play around with this. Let's see. Not that big of a change, but maybe somewhere around there could be cool. Not too important. This is all just gonna change the tone of the snare ever so slightly. So I'm gonna turn on no alts, because I want this to be the same every single time. I don't want it to do anything different every time it plays. I just want it to be really precise. So already it's now giving us the exact same sample every time it plays, and I can use this to basically just look for what sample I want. I think this one is pretty good. Let's go into the volume envelope and let's give it a bit of attack, because we're gonna create our synthesized fundamental. If you hold shift, you can curve this, by the way. And you also get fine control by holding shift. Next thing, we want to bring down the sustain level, and then we can use the decay time to basically dial in how long the snare is going to be. And then again, hold shift, and we can give it the shape it has to be. So we're going to start somewhere around this. We might actually get a lot shorter when the patch evolves, when the patch gets bigger. But for now, this is a good starting point. I'm also going to completely bring the room down for now. So that's what the snare sounds like by itself. Let's do a little bit of EQ here. So I can put on an EQ. So let's do an EQ8 here. And if I look at the EQ here, I can see where the fundamental is. So the fundamental is hitting on D. Let's bring the pitch up a bit. So now it's close to B. Not that it's that important, because I might actually like it more somewhere around there. It's not really that important. What we want to know, though, is what frequency we are on right here. So that peak is right at 359 Hertz. So I can use this cutoff here to basically cut that fundamental off. And it should... It's not really doing that, though. Maybe we need to go higher. It is getting a little quieter. We'll do it by ourselves. It's not that important. Let's bring the room back up so we can hear what we're doing. Now, I'm really not too concerned of getting a very loud snare right off the bat. I'm really more concerned of basically finding interesting parts that can work for our final drum sound, and then we will use those to kind of build something up over time, and it will get louder and louder as we go. So that will be a good starting point for now. Let's go into our fundamental, and I'm going to give it a bit of a pitch envelope. So let's go in here and let's do... Let's just start with a simple one. Something like this, maybe. Just a very basic, sort of like pitch envelope. Unsync that, and let's set it to envelope mode. Bring this up, and we're gonna assign that to the pitch. And let's make sure it's unipolar. And then we can use this to add a bit of pitch envelope, and then as we dial that back, you can hear pitch envelope is starting to appear. Now, it might be cool to have a little bit of a part where it just stays on the maximum pitch for ever so slightly and then drops down. That gives it a more pronounced sort of like transient. Works a little bit better when this is a little bit lower. So you get more of that sort of like knocky kind of sound. Usually it works pretty well, though, when we do that. And then we can, for instance, stack another one on top of it that is really short, and then just curve down like that. Set that to envelope mode and unsynced. Bring this all the way up, and again, we want to have that on the pitch, so... oscillator A, coarse pitch, unipolar, and then we will bring this up a little bit more, and this one will really give it a click. So the more we have it like that, and then you can hear how that really adds a click now. And you can literally just bring that all the way up, and it just becomes a very loud click. We can make that really fast. Blend it back in. Right away, our fundamental is now really powerful, so that's kind of what you need, right? So next up, let's work on that Addictive Drums layer a little bit. So it's a little bit quiet. So what we're going to do, first of all, is we're going to add some limiting to it. So we want to basically use this as a layer. So let's just limit the hell out of it. Maybe not even that much, maybe just cranking it up until it's almost at the top. So that's basically just giving us a very sort of like loud, loud tail at the moment. A bit much, but it's gonna be fine. So let's see, we have... Okay, so the room... I'm tempted to not even use the room and only use this part. Ooh, that's also nice resonance. 72%. Ooh, 69. That one sounds nice. It's a good starting point. Again, let's go back in here. Let's see if... Oh, that makes quite a big difference. Okay, somewhere around 25, minus 25% seems right. So... yeah, I'm gonna roll with a little bit of the fundamental. And I'm also going to roll with a little bit of the tops there, so I'm really just zoning in on the frequency range there. And the reason why is because I want to use this as a resonance, so we don't really need this one. Let's take a Pro Q, an actual good EQ. And I want to get rid of the fundamental here, so let's take a pretty steep curve. And we want to basically cut that fundamental off. We don't want to cut everything off here because we don't want to do this. See, we need to keep quite a bit here. We just need to get rid of most of the fundamental. And then we can always sort of like emphasize that a little bit with another sort of like point right around here and then just bringing that down with a narrow Q, maybe even a little bit more of a wider slope. And that way we can really sort of like take out the fundamental part here. We might also want to... oh, no, not that one. Just bring the gain down. We also might want to do the same thing here, right around this area. Because there's another one right there. And we might want to check... yeah, that one. Might be a little bit much. That's an alright starting point. And I'm just rolling off some of those high frequencies as well, because we're gonna fill that up with noise. Okay, that's a good starting point. We need to make sure that there is a little bit of a a little bit of a delay between these two channels. I basically want the Addictive Drums layer to have a bit of an attack to it. So I'm going to create another track right here at the top, and we're going to call that triggers. And we're going to use that to basically trigger all of the things that need to be triggered with MIDI. So I'm just going to put one of the MIDI clips there so it has a MIDI node feeding into it. And that way we can use this to basically just say we're going to put on an external instrument on that track. And then I'm going to take an LFO tool. You can also use what is it called? Volume shaper. I like LFO tool though, so let's just grab this. And what we want to do is we want to basically create a shape. Let's start with this. And I'm going to set this to be envelope mode. So don't click this twice so it turns into envelope mode. And I'm going to unsync that. And let's just set it to 1/2, which is the length of this. And then we're going to send this external instrument to it. Oh, we need to put the LFO tool on the Addictive Drums track, by the way. So let's just drag it there. And then let's send the external instrument to the Addictive Drums tail and then to LFO tool. And I'm going to group this as well because we're probably going to need more of these as we build the patch. So now this should be receiving a signal. I can see that we can actually bring this down to 1/4 because our snare is not really much longer than that. And all I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a little bit of a fade in at the start. So I'm going to create a point here and a point here. Let's just do this. And let's give it a bit of a fade. And we can also use this to cut it shorter if we want to. So I usually just set up a point like this that is sort of like somewhere around here, and then I can basically just use the curve to make it more or less. So the more you put it here, the tighter it becomes. And you can literally just use the curve itself. You don't really have to do much else. You can even just do it like that. So I'll just leave it like this, but if we need to have it tighter, we can just make it tighter. And if it still needs to be even tighter, you can just do this. You can just take another point and just bring that back. So usually just have something like this. It's a good starting point. So you can hear there's a little bit of a delay happening now on the Addictive Drums. It doesn't really have a transient anymore, which is good. And already these two together sound like it could become a good snare. So let's go into the next track, the noise tail. Let's take another serum, and I'm gonna take another MIDI note. So let's just take that MIDI note. Let's give it the same color as that one. And let's go into the serum. And I'm going to solo this track for now. So we don't need that. Let's just turn it off. And we're going to use one of these noises. Now, I would advise you to use mono noise for this. Because that way your snare drum tail is going to be very powerful in mono. If you're going to use stereo noise, you really want to make sure that when you sum that noise to mono, it actually still sounds good. Because sometimes when you use stereo noise and you sum it to mono, it might actually not sound all that good, and it might start phasing really badly. So you want to make sure that it sounds good in mono. So starting with a mono noise source is going to be probably the best option, because that way we don't really have to worry too much about any of it. So I'm just going to start with one of these. So let's just take the alpha noise, and I'm going to bring the level all the way down. And we're going to do a very similar thing as what we did on the fundamental. So I'm just going to take this LFO1, and I'm going to put that on the level. So that's the initial thing we're gonna get. That's not really what we need. So what we need is an envelope, and we need this to be a bit more like this. We need some attack. And then we need a bit of, maybe a slight bit of hold, and then we want it to go down again. And I'm also gonna unsync it. So that we really can get a lot of control over the length of it. I also want to run this through a filter, so let's do a high pass 24, and I'm going to run the noise through it, bring the resonance down. That's sort of like a good starting point. We can also use one of the multi filters here, also work pretty good. The low high pass ones are pretty cool. High band pass is pretty cool. High and a peak is pretty cool. Let's do a low and high actually. So let's do low, or which one should we do? Let's do high and peak. That might be cool. Let's do a high pass here. And it doesn't really matter if it's not filtering off all the low end, because we're gonna get rid of all the low end that we don't need anyway. But this is always good to just shape it a little bit. So by having that extra peak there, you can kind of balance a little bit how the noise sounds, which is kind of cool. Can give some interesting effects with the final patch. I would also advise to maybe take like another LFO set to envelope mode, maybe with a full beat, which is kind of like roughly what the snare. The snare's going to be shorter than a full beat, but it will give us a nice little thing that we can use on multiple parameters. So for instance, on that peak, we can add this one, and let's say give it a bit of a range, and now every time the snare hits, it will basically start messing with this knob here. And it's very subtle, but that's what it's doing. And it's just subtly adding some movement to the noise. So if we now listen to that, and we might have to do some volume balancing now as well. Okay. Let's do a little bit of balancing here. Let's start off with the fundamental and the addictive drums. So I'm going to bring the addictive drums layer down. And let's also bring the fundamental down a little bit. Actually, let me do it with the utility. And this might be a little quiet, but it's gonna make sense in a bit. So I'm just listening to the levels of the layers now. Just trying to give them a little bit more of a nicer balance. Let's bring the noise in. So that one is way too loud. Let's bring it down. And you'll actually be able to hear in just a bit, when we start adding processing, that we can probably take a lot of these layers down even more. Like this noise, it's really tempting to sort of like put it at this level, right? Because you're like, we need that high end. But you'll actually hear that it's probably going to sound a lot better when we bring it a lot quieter. And it's just there to kind of fill out some of the high end. And then as we do the more processing, we then do more processing, we can bring all of that character out of it which is going to make the end result a lot better. So I would say this is a good starting point. A couple of fun things we could do now. For instance, we have this noise, right? Let me take all of this right now, and let me group all of this in a group called snare design. So that's going to be our main group. Let me actually change the color of that, because that looks hideous. Let's make it like that, and let's just give that our nice dark purple color. So now we have this group here, and let's start by boosting the level, because we want to get this up to a bit more of a respectable level. I'm going to use a nice clipper, so I'm going to use newfangled audio saturate, and right off the bat it's going to already increase the level here. We want to increase that a bit more. And we're probably going to, you know, get more clipping as we go, but we can also boost the input gain a bit. So I can hear a bunch of things now that are wrong with the snare. It has a lot of low mids, and we're lacking some high end. So what we need is we need to play around with the layers, first of all. Play around with the fundamental. We can change it a little bit to make it fit better, and then we want to start processing this all together. So we also haven't added any audio layers yet, and I'll get to that in just a bit. So let's start with the noise layer. And let's do something fun on that. So I'm going to solo the noise layer. And that is what we have. So it's pretty damn quiet. And it also has a lot of low mids, which isn't really what we need. So if we look at it on an EQ, you can kind of see it as well, right? It has a lot of sort of like low mid stuff here, which we don't need. I'll show you a pretty cool trick that you can use to kind of mess with noise in a very interesting way. What I would do is take a high pass, and this is what I got from one of the templates from the Vitae Lupus pack that kind of inspired the sample pack that I'm making currently. In his templates that he gave me, I could see what he did to some of the noise tails, and he was using this as well. So basically, just take a high pass and just high pass it quite far up, and just bring it down a little bit, so it's a very gentle kind of slope. And then you also want to take a low pass and do the same thing. So we're really getting rid of almost the entire sound at this point. And now we want to use some kind of effect that is gonna really distort the crap out of it. So let's, for instance, take... let's try an overdrive. So now that brings it up again. And now we can start messing with this. So we can say maybe a bit more highs. Get a bit more in the higher frequencies, like that. And even though there's nothing visible here, we can still use all the other points to change the tone of the noise. So I can say, okay, I want some more high end. So let's give it a nice white Q here. And boost some of that high end. Let's do another cut somewhere. Sure, that sounds cool. Let's do another one somewhere. A little bit of a wider one. Not sure how much that's actually doing, but hey. Let's do another high pass to make sure that there's nothing down there. And let's do another boost somewhere. Let's boost some of these these low mids again. So I'm really just using this to shape whatever the noise is doing. And it's very subtle, but it does, I don't know, it's so like interesting. So this is before, and that's after. So it just messes with the noise, and it's cool to just mess with the position of these and just play around with them, and you'll get like interesting results. So let's use dynamic tube as well. See if we can crank it up a bit more. So let's raise the bias. Let's raise the drive. And we can also raise the input gain. So let's do a utility here and boost the level going into the dynamic tube. And we're just really distorting the hell out of it, and let's bring it down again. So you can hear these steps are sort of like we're building the noise up over time. So we came from that, and now we're at that, and the noise has also become very weird. It's now sort of like only sitting on one side of the... That's really weird. Maybe we need to do a little bit less of that, but let's just use it. Let's do this, and let's bring the dry wet down a little. Ooh. Okay. Let's do this. Let's take another utility after this and bring it down again. There we go. So we have a little bit of a lopsided sort of like noise, but it's... Yeah, that could be cool. But it's not fully on one side, so it's not fully on the positive side and nothing on the negative side, but yeah, that looks good, looks nice. So if we now play this together with the rest, it's still pretty quiet. And it's tempting to put it up, but we're gonna, like I said, build this up over time. First things, I want to go back into the till here. So it's a little bit long. So let's go in here and let's back this up a little. Because we're making a drum and bass snare, right? So we want to keep a little bit of that resonance in the till here. Like that stuff around there. And then... That's pretty decent. I really think we need that because that's where the noise is gonna come in. So just dipping down a little bit. And you can see I'm just making more and more changes as we go, and that's really gonna be where all of this is gonna shine as well. It's just a matter of just making changes over time, and all these little changes add up to making the drum sound more interesting. And the more of these little things you do, eventually turn into a really interesting sound. Or maybe it's not interesting, that could also happen, but it's just a matter of practice, right? You need to get better at this as you practice this. But by doing all these little things, that's how you're gonna get to more interesting drums, right? That nobody else has. So, I mean, we're at a good starting point. Let's do a little record here and see how it looks. So, it looks alright. I'm not sure why it's not doing any delay compensation. That's a little weird. Not sure why that is happening. That's weird. Let's just take the output of the track snare design. Let's see what happens if we do that. Yeah, that works. Okay, weird. So if we use resampling, it's not doing delay compensation. Oh, okay. So it actually looks pretty decent already. It's not that bad. I mean, we can do a bit more here to the transient, make it a little bit more interesting. But the noise comes in at a good point. It's sort of like, it has a little bit of a part where the sine wave is clearly visible. And it's sort of like clearly very clean. And then the noise starts coming in, and that's nice. So that's exactly what we want. I do think the resonance is a little bit low pitched. So let's see if we can increase the resonance and make it a little bit higher. So I'm going to use a frequency shifter. I'm just going to put that after all of the processing here. And this is also why the Pro Q came in handy, which I used to take off the fundamental, because now I'm putting a frequency shifter after that, and we're going to use that to shift it up. So we're going to shift the snare drum layer that had the fundamental frequency removed with this Pro Q here, like there, and we're going to shift that up now. So we're going to shift all of this up and see where it lands. So let's just play, and I'm just going to... I kind of like it around there. Yeah, I like that. So like around a little bit more, so like around 40 something hertz. And because we've removed the fundamental, it also doesn't really matter anymore where we put this resonance. It doesn't really necessarily have a pitch. It does kind of have a pitch, but most likely the harmonics don't really relate to each other. They're kind of atonal anyway. So we can put it basically just anywhere it sounds good. And you could even just bounce these both and have two separate sounding snares that are sounding similar but slightly different. A little bit of a lower one and a bit of a higher one. So yeah, there's multiple things you could do with that, but I kind of like this one, so let's use that. And we might want to put another EQ on it afterwards, because sometimes it does create extra frequencies, but this time it's actually not that bad. So we don't really need it. Looking pretty good. So let's have a little listen. So it's completely mono, first of all. Nothing happening in the stereo, which means that if we listen to this snare drum in mono, it's going to sound just as powerful, which is very good, because that means that this snare drum is now going to work in any kind of situation. We do probably want to have a little bit of width to the snare. So in the Addictive Drums layer, we have the overhead and the room. Now the overhead and the room are going to increase a little bit of the stereo width on the sound. So we might want to use either one of these. They're pretty aggressive though. Like, you can hear it automatically just massively changes the tone of the snare. And that might not be completely what we're after. See, it's something. It has an interesting tone, but, and the same with the room. It's just maybe a little bit like that, just to have a little bit in the sides might be cool, but I don't think we need all that much. So let's just do something like that, and I'm gonna go Let's just use, we'll just do one of the two. So let's do the overhead, something like that. And you can see here at the top, the top lane here of the oscilloscope or the waveform view, whatever it is the mid channel, and the bottom view is the side channel. So you can see we're getting a little bit of side information, but mostly mid information. I'm also gonna do, on the overhead channel, I'm gonna click here and I'm gonna add an EQ. And we're just gonna roll that off, because we really don't need anything below that in the sides anyway. What should we do next? Let's think. We can use the tone design as well here to change the resonance. But honestly, I think it was pretty good like that. Maybe a slight increase might be nice, but sure. So we're getting closer to a good snare. Let's go back into the fundamental. I'm just messing with the... Let's make it a little quicker. Okay. So you can hear now how much the noise tail is also doing. Because we have these now in stereo, we do want to check how much it sounds different in mono. So it's actually not that much different at all, so that's really good. That means it's going to sound really good in mono as well. Let's take an EQ on the tails group now, so that includes the Addictive Drums and the noise tail. And I can see like what the two look like together. And right away, I can see something interesting. Do you see all that low end that has appeared? That is coming from the noise tail track. So if I put an EQ on there, you can see there's a lot of low end here. So let's take that off. Because we don't need that. And then on here, let's boost the high end a little. I'm also gonna turn oversampling on. When you're doing drums, you most of the time want to use oversampling. And we don't want to do too much, We just want to raise some of that high end a little. But we don't want to add too much, because we can always add more later on. Let's have a little look now at what this looks like. Starting to look pretty decent. And we still haven't done a lot on the group itself, so we probably still want to do quite a bit on the group itself to gel everything together. But for now, we're going in a good direction. So let's go and add some audio layers to this, because I think when I look at this, we have a little bit of a, yeah, some weird kind of a gap here. I think I would like to have a little bit more noise coming in a little earlier. So we might want to find something that we can use in this area right here to kind of layer in here. And I'm thinking maybe some kind of a clap layer could work. So let's go into my sample packs, drums, and let's do hits, claps. And let's see what we have. Mono claps. Maybe that one. So I'm just going to use a clap here. And we just want to fill up that area there. So if we zoom in, we can also see where it sits. So you can see we have the, so like the noise starting to come in right here. So you can even add markers like that. So you can say like, okay, I want maybe the snare to come in somewhere around here. You can just say, okay, let's add a locator right there. And then it needs to be there until right about there. Add locator. And then we know, so like roughly in that area is where we want the clap to sit. So let's give it a bit of a volume shape like that. And then we're gonna mess with the end part here. Just gonna do something like this. And we might need more of the tail or less, depending on how we're gonna use it and how it sounds. But let's just get started with this. So you can hear our snare is pretty clean, but once we add this, it becomes really messy. That's obviously because there's probably some low end in that clap that we absolutely don't need. So let's put an EQ on. Might even grab a Pro Q. Pro Q. So all of this stuff down there, we don't need that at all. So we're just gonna roll that off. And right away, you can hear that our cleaner fundamental is coming through again. So now, you can just hear it adds a little bit of an extra sort of like layer. And let's use this. I actually like it with a little bit more of that tail in it. It's a little bit loud. Let's... See, it's very subtle now, but that is exactly what we want. Just subtly adding a little bit of noise there. And if we now record this again, let me also turn off the count in. then we should be able to see. Yeah, see, there's a little bit of noise coming in now here, which is nice. So those first two cycles that have a little bit of noise now, which is pretty nice. That looks good. I think we've made a pretty decent snare. There's more we can do to it though. I would most of the time group the tail and the audio together so that you can apply some reverb to it. So take like a Pro Q or Pro R or Valhalla reverb, whichever you like. I like Valhalla, but this one is open already, so let's just use that. I'm gonna create a group here. One is gonna be called Through, that's just gonna have nothing on it. And this one I'm gonna call Reverb. And we want a really short reverb for this one, so way too long. Let's go something much shorter. And now this also hugely increases the width, so we want to bring this down a bit. Because again, we don't want the snare to change that much when we sum it to mono. And we can also play around with the level of the reverb, so just blend it in a little bit so it's a little bit quieter. And then we can probably also get away with a little bit more width. So if we listen to that together now with the fundamental, so you can hear how that helps to gel it all together. But the fundamental is really clean because the fundamental doesn't have the reverb applied to it. I might even go a little bit quieter on the reverb. But you can hear how it really nicely gels that together. So, I'm just gonna call that Tills Reverb. So you can see how this is starting to become a little bit more of a complicated looking project already. And we've only really made one snare. But the beautiful part of this is the more you make these, the more you can then make multiple out of it. I can just say, okay, let's say this one is good. So it's not entirely how I like it yet, but we need to do some more processing on the track itself, so on the group. So let's just do that. Let's take Pro Q. And I want to do a little bit of shaping here, so I'm gonna yeah, I definitely want to reduce that a bit, but I want it to be there at the start, so I'm gonna do this. So I'm basically just making it dynamic, and then bringing that back up again. So that when it hits, it's actually up, but then as the snare decays down, this also goes down. Maybe a little bit much. Don't want to do too much. Yeah, that's good. So it's cleaning up that middle area a little bit. We can also give it maybe a little bit of a boost on the fundamental there. Let's make it dynamic. Let's make that bell curve. Now that's a nice amount of noise. We probably will add more later, but I'm just gonna make it dynamic again, and I'm gonna look for like right around there. Sounds pretty good. I also want to check. Let's do a high pass in the sides, and let's take out that fundamental of the sides. Because we don't need that in the sides. So if I now listen to the sides, there's nothing of that fundamental in there at all. It's literally just a bit of noise. Mostly just a resonance, honestly. Noise, the noise is still mono, I think. Or isn't it? Oh no, there's a little bit of width to the noise. Coming from the reverb, of course, but it's mostly just nothing of the fundamental. It's mostly just that Addictive Drums with a bit of the noise that's in the sides now. That's starting to sound better. Now I would start doing processing on the group here, and there's a lot of things you can do. Just go crazy, you know? Just do interesting things, like also on the individual layers, just try out all kinds of stuff. Like, even if you have a fundamental, it would not, like, practically speaking, it would not make sense to put a compressor on that, right? Because it's a very short, like 10 to 20 millisecond long sound that has like no dynamics, because it's like one moment it's at its maximum possible level, and then it's gonna drop down to zero in like the case of maybe a millisecond or a couple of milliseconds. So it's like there's no necessarily, like, no practical reason why you would put a compressor on your fundamental layer. But if you do it and you let it compress, even though there's technically no dynamic range to compress, it's still going to add artifacts and little distortion and all those kind of things. And that is exactly what you want. You want to apply like weird things to see what happens, and if it changes the tone a little bit, that's exactly what you want. If you have really weird looking EQ shapes, don't be afraid by that, because that's just completely normal when you're making drum sounds. So let's do a little bit of compression. Let's do maybe 3 attack. And let's sure. I mean, again, this is not really doing that much. Like, it brings the tail up a little bit. Definitely brings the tail up slightly, and it slightly changes how the sound reacts to the incoming, or how it so like feels. Like, that's too much on the attack. So he just tightens up that transient a bit, which like 3, so let's do that. And like what I said, like, you can take a compressor and just compress the hell out of that fundamental just to see what happens, you know? Even if there's not really any reason why you should have to do this. If you want to make interesting stuff, just try this out. And then just crank the output gain again, or turn makeup off on. And you can just hear what it does to the fundamental. So let's do quick attack and release. Now it's theoretically just kind of clipping in a way. Do I like that? Yes or no? See, it's all about like in this case, it does make it a lot more punchy, but I'm not too big of a fan, so I'm just gonna leave that. I mean, we're pretty close to a good snare at this moment. Oh yeah, another cool thing that we could do. Let's use. Let's grab a Serum Effects. And let's put that after the compressor. And I'm gonna send another trigger into this one. So let's duplicate this one. Let's choose the snare design group. And then we'll choose Serum Effects as the input there. And now we can use this one to basically do some stuff. So now remember, this is going to be applied to the entire snare. So this is going to be applied to the fundamental, to everything that's in this patch, basically. So I can start messing with this. So let's try a bell shape and... So it's basically just adding a little bit of a sort of like change into terms of like how the frequencies are interacting when the sound hits. It's very subtle, but I love doing changes like that because it really can make quite a big difference. Like again, I'm not too sure if I really like this change, but it's just stuff like that. I do like that. Maybe even like that. It's not really doing much at the moment, so let's just get rid of it. Like sometimes you just need to say like, okay, that's not really doing too much, so let's just get rid of it. There's gonna be a point like right now. I'm kind of reached a point where I don't think this snare is gonna improve that much more. So I would probably start calling this close to being done. I might want to do a little bit more reverb on it, just so that we can gel the fundamental with the rest of the snare a little bit more. I would grab maybe a Valhalla Room, and we'll put that on the snare design group, and I'm gonna just put that, let's put it all the way at the start. And let's group that, and create ourselves another one of those racks. So this one is gonna be through, and this is gonna be our wet chain. And then we want to do the same thing again, basically. So, way too big. Need something much smaller. We can also change this, so maybe go for a chamber, or we can maybe use we can also try vintage verb. And then use a plate reverb instead. Now it's quite long, so what we want to do is bring the size down. And it's still long, but we're gonna make it work. I'll bring the depth on the mod, bring that down to 0% so that it's not gonna change it's not gonna do any modulation on the reverb. That way, every time the snare hits, it's still gonna sound exactly the same as the previous one, which kind of works. So. Sure, let's do the plate. So that's what we're getting now. Very wide. Let's put on a utility, first of all, to make it a bit less wide. And we can put on an LFO tool on the layer here, or we don't even need an LFO tool, I guess. We can use a compressor maybe. Let's do a compressor, and let's put that on the reverb channel. I'm just going to use the Live 8 sidechain compressor basically setup. So this is just a Live 8 compressor, the one that I always use. And I'm going to pick my fundamental as the input, so that when the snare hits, the fundamental comes in, and it basically ducks down the reverb here. So if I play it together with the other channel, we can hear our fundamental is clean still. So now it's way too much reverb, so let's bring it down. And you can hear how that really helps to gel the entire thing together. Just back it off a little bit to make sure, like, that's the completely dry one. That's that, maybe still a bit much. And I do think we need our LFO tool, so I could have used the LFO tool anyway, but let's just go for the LFO tool then. Take the sidechain compressor off, because we'll just do it all with the LFO tool. Duplicate this one, and let's send it into the track. So we have the snare design track, and then the LFO tool on the reverb channel. Set that to envelope mode. And I think we can use 1/4. Let's try 1/2. No, we can use 1/4. There's not much happening in the second half, so. So you can see we already have a bit of that sort of like fade in at the start of that reverb, so that's good. But we might want to have a little bit more, so let's just do this. Just to make sure that first part of that snare is clean as it can be. And then we will just take, basically just do this. And we can cut the reverb short again. So now we want to go back into here and listen to how much of a difference it makes. So this is with the reverb, and I'm going to turn it off. And you can just hear how it fills out that entire snare, because all of the frequencies that are in this sound are now running through that reverb, and it's sort of like being pushed together with everything else. So it just helps to gel it all together. We can go a little bit further now still, though. One thing that could always be fun to try out, and this is what I mean, just experiment as much as you can. Take a frequency shifter, put it after the reverb, and let's shift this up. And let's see what happens. So you can, for instance, frequency shift the reverb up, for instance. Not really liking it that much, so I'm just going to leave it. Sounds pretty good the way it is. You might want to put an EQ on it, just so that we can see how much of it is in there. Might want to roll off a little bit of the fundamental in the reverb. Not remove it completely, but like, just maybe rolled off a little. It's going to be very subtle, but it's all those very subtle changes that really matter. So let's record this one and have a look at how it looks now. So you can see how that really has become a big fat snare drum here. And that looks pretty good. So now I would put on an EQ here so I can see what it is. And this one is hitting at 248 Hertz, and it's in the key of B. So this would be a good moment to save your snare drum. Like when you're happy with it, save it. I would just solo this track and just basically bounce this into a folder with samples. You can also just chuck all the ones that you've made on a track, which is probably a better way of doing it. I usually just do it like this. When I'm happy with one, I just immediately bounce it into a folder. So, what was it, 248, I believe? 248 Hertz, roughly, in the key of B. We'll just bounce that. And now we should have that in our sample folder. To 48 in B. So that's basically how you set up the template. And from here, I would just quickly like to show you how easy it is to then make more. Because now we have this entire setup, right? And this entire setup that we have here makes up one snare. So I can replace any of these parts and create something new. For instance, we can go into Addictive Drums. And we can just go and swap out this one. So let's say, I don't know, let's use... Sure, that one sounds kind of cool. And immediately we can hear how it sounds. Right? So, okay, that could be a part maybe. Let's go in here. Let's go crazy with the frequency shifter. Okay, That might be a bit too much. Oh, there we go. It's interesting. See what happens if we give this one a bit more till. Oh. Okay, let's go into the Addictive Drums. Let's increase this one. Okay, this one is pretty short. In that case, like there might also be another one. So like making it short because we have more down here. Sure. So this one is just not that long to begin with, this snare, which is fine. A way to make it longer, I guess, would be to just pitch it down. And then take the frequency shifter, pitch it up a lot. But you can hear it starts messing with everything, so you have to sort of like play around with it and okay, maybe that one. I mean, that could be a good one as well. Like you can make ones with a longer tail as well if you want. Just leave the tail a bit longer. It's that simple. Okay, let's say we want to change the noise tail. So I'm just going to duplicate the noise tail track. I'm going to turn the one off that we had. Go into here. And let's just mess with this one. So we have LFO 1 is controlling the level. So we could maybe slow it down a bit. We get a bit more of that noise. And you can also go into the fundamental and just start messing with the fine tune here. Or with the... And you'll sometimes find out that just changing that, and suddenly it sounds really cool. And you'll be like, oh, this pitch actually sounds really good with the resonance. And sometimes it doesn't matter if not everything is in the same pitch. Like that. Sounds pretty big. Maybe we want a bit more of the woody tone. Actually, I kind of like it like that. Maybe we want to have this. So only that transient is having the woody kind of tone. Sounds kind of cool. Not too shabby. Let's grab another LFO tool. After the compressor here. And let's just bring this up. And we want to have another trigger. So let's just duplicate that. And we're going to go in the other LFO tool. Which is not compensated for some reason. Let's put it at the start. Also not working. That's a bit annoying. There we go. We just need to make sure it's triggering. Okay, let's put this after the compressor. So now we can use this to basically just control how much we're gonna get, how long the snare is gonna be. So that would be a bit more of a sort of like a very tight kind of a snare. It's a bit. This one needs to be tweaked though because the noise comes up a little bit late. So I would wanna maybe do that. And you can sometimes really do weird shit like this as well. Like have really weird shapes and it doesn't matter. Like what matters is what it sounds like. And what it sounds like when it's done. So like sure, that could be another one. So let's just record this one real quick. Looks a bit different than the other one. As you can see, there's a little bit of what we would call bow tying effect, where there's a little bit of a volume dip here happening, and then it increases again in level, which is sometimes considered a bad thing, but it's not that bad. Honestly, it's fine. You can fix it. You can make this louder. That's something you could do, but it's not that big of a deal, honestly. I don't really mind it when this happens. What we could do now, for instance, is that one. It's cool, but it has a pretty high sort of like fundamental. So what we could do with this one now is, for instance, pitch it down a bit and see what happens. And sometimes you'll get some pretty cool results. So let's say that is pretty cool. The only thing is there's a little bit too little sort of like low frequencies in it. Or high frequencies in the noise, but that's something we could fix, right? But that as well, it's a pretty tight kind of a snare, but still one that I would quite like to use, honestly. Maybe a little bit much on the attack here. Or you can always do a little fade like that. And make it better again. That might be a little bit better, so let's just consolidate that. There we go. And sometimes you just want to have another, what is it, frequency shifter? Because we can continue on this track now. We can start processing this one again. So put on a frequency shifter. Ooh, that's pretty cool. That could be a pretty cool one. Let's go and take some kind of a transient shaper. Native Instruments Transient Master. Let's put that on here. Sure. Let's take a FabFilter Pro Q. So we can do some sort of like dynamic volume changes. So looks pretty good. Let's do a little high pass here. I'm gonna give this one a dynamic boost. Cut. Basically do the same thing as what I showed earlier. What this does is basically we're cutting, and then we're also boosting it dynamically. So what this is doing, when you're cutting and then having the dynamic part boosting, it's basically gonna make that frequency tighter. So when that frequency first comes in, it's still gonna be audible, but then it's really quickly gonna decay down towards this value here, making it tighter. If you do it the other way around, like this, it's basically gonna make that frequency last longer. So it's gonna do the opposite of make it tighter. Actually, am I right? Or am I doing it the wrong way around? Whatever, this sounds good, so... we just want to give it that little bit of extra oomph, maybe? And there's a really loud frequency happening here, which I do quite like, so... let's see. Right there. Yeah, see, so it is making it tighter when we do it this way. Go. So again, I'm just trying to listen to it and seeing what happens when we do some EQ changes to it, and just messing with it. Basically, that's all I'm doing. Don't really have specific things that I'm doing. I'm really just listening to it and just doing stuff. And sometimes you wanna do like weird shit like that. Can also be pretty cool. Already made it dynamic. Not sure why I cannot see the range. Oh, maybe I did not make it dynamic. There we go. See, so we can boost that area and cut it. So it's being boosted when it first hits, and then it's being cut afterwards. And you can really easily, by using this on-off switch, listen to what just that filter is doing. So that's with, that's without. And you can see how that's making a huge change. And it's really bringing out that frequency. And you can see, even if I do it like all the way like that, so there's like a very narrow band here, we still get that same effect. So we're completely changing the snare from this to this. And that sounds pretty good, actually. I'm going to bring the level down a bit here, because we were clipping. And let's go and grab another transient shaper. Let's do... Where are you? Let's do the Shock Audio transient shaper. Again, I'm just picking different plugins as we go, just to see what kind of result we're gonna get. So this one, let's boost the attack a bit. This one I find is really good for boosting that first initial attack. Which I took out as well here with the fade, but again, sometimes changes during this process, during the sound design process, sometimes your choices don't necessarily make any sense. And it doesn't matter, because you're doing sound design. Just tightening that up a little bit again. And let's see what else do we have. What else can we run it through? How long have I been recording for? Holy shit, almost 2 hours. Oh my god. This is a long session. Sorry, everybody. Didn't know that it was that long. Well, I guess you guys don't mind too much, I guess. Let's do... let's not use Camel Crusher. That one is probably a bit overly... Let's just put on another newfangled audio saturate. Still lacking a little bit of high end, so I'm gonna grab another Pro Q. Again, also don't be afraid to stack multiple ones in case you have to. So like right here, I'm just gonna go right here. And I wanna give it a bit more high end. So we're gonna give it something like this, make dynamic, and in fact, with this one, it might be good to do this. Because we want to boost that tail. That might be a bit much. And we might also want to give it a little bit of a boost here. So it's just shaping the snare ever so slightly. Sometimes you might want to add a bit of noise or a bit of something extra. But that sounds pretty decent again, so at this point I would just say make another track. Set the input to the other track, so the resampling track, and just say, there you go. So we can have a look at it, and we can actually see the difference between the two. And you can see that it still looks like a decent snare, right? It still has the same kind of look, but it sounds completely different. So, again, take an EQ, just so that we can figure out what the pitch is. Because this one we've used a frequency shifter, so we need to basically just look at it. For some reason I shifted it down to another B at 244 Hertz. So make sure this is selected, give it a fade out just to be sure. If there's a little bit of reverb tail still, make sure that's cut off. And then let's just set that to the track that we're actually exporting. Hit export. What was it, 244 Hertz? I think we already had one. Oh no, we didn't. Okay, there we go. And now we have more snares. So now I have that one. And you can see how that one was made from this one, but it sounds completely different. I've made a bunch more over the last couple of days. And I'm going to be making a whole lot more in the upcoming weeks. That's going to be it for this video, though. I hope you liked it. It's a little bit of a longer one, and I'm not going to edit this one down too much because I feel like this is just a video that you guys want to see the entire process of, probably, how to set this up and how to do everything. So another thing to quickly show you, let's say you just made like a bunch of snares. So you've just made a bunch of them. I'm just going to grab a bunch of the ones that I already made. But let's say you are making a ton of samples and you're just dropping them all on a track like this, right? Because you just want to keep going. You don't want to worry about like, oh, I need to export them and all that shit. So you just drop, every time you've made a good one, you just drop it on a track. And then you get to this point and you're like, okay, now I need to export these, right? What am I gonna do? So at this point, I would just say, what you probably should do is just create yourself a blank audio track at the bottom here, and name that however you want it to, however you want your samples to be named. I think this should work. So let's say ARTFX snare, and that's gonna be our name. Now I'm gonna go into here and I'm gonna select all of these ones that we made. Now we've only made a couple of ones here, but let's say we've made all of these. And I'm gonna select them all, and I'm gonna click and drag all of these down into session view, and I'm gonna drop them on that track that I just made. We'll just drop them on there like that, and we are just gonna make sure that they're selected again, and we're gonna go back and drag them back into arrangement view. This time, I'm gonna drop them on this track, and while I do that, I hold Control. Wait. Control Alt. Control Alt. Why is it not working? It should... Maybe we need to hold Control first and then click and drag. Why is it not working? There should be a way to drop them all on multiple tracks. I'm not entirely sure why it's not working. Why is that not working? That's weird. There should be a way to basically drop them all on different tracks instead of all on the same track. I'm not sure why it's not doing that. I thought it was the control knob that would do that, but for some reason it's not working. Okay, well, I checked. I'm not entirely sure why it's not working, but this should normally theoretically work. If you drag them from here into here, you should be able to hold Control and it should create a bunch of tracks and put them on individual tracks. I'm not sure why it's not doing that, but that's what it should normally do. Yeah, not entirely sure why it's not doing that, but you basically just want to either export these all one by one, or you want to try and figure out how you can put them all on individual tracks. I'm not sure if we can... I don't think we can do it from here. Like, we cannot render these just like that. You can obviously just drag these all into a folder. And that's something you could do. So you could say, like, create a folder here, for instance, called ARTFX snares. And then we can just take all of these clips that we made that are here as well. So let's just take all of these and we can just drop those in there. Oh, we cannot. Well, then we're gonna drop them on here. And can we drop those in there? We can. So a little bit of a different workaround. Just hit copy. It's gonna create that project file for you. And then you should get your samples here. And the process ones. So there you go. Those are basically the samples that I made, right? So it's just, you can do it that way. Just have to do the renaming afterwards. That's why I do it always just, I make a snare drum, and when I'm happy with one, I bounce it. That's for Ableton still, in my opinion, the best workflow. Just the moment you've made a sample, bounce it to audio, move on to making the next one. And then at some point, you're going to have a whole ton of them. So like the ones that I have here. And you can use those again as well to make new ones from. Like I can take this one, for instance, and I can say, okay, that one is nice. What happens if I pitch it up? Right? What happens if I pitch it up? And what happens if I now start processing this again? What happens if I take this one and take another one, layer them together, and only take the resonance from one, shift that resonance up with a frequency shifter again, and take the fundamental and the noise from another one, and combine the ones that you've already made, and that way you will make even more new ones out of the samples you already have. So it's a bit of a process. You want to set up yourself a couple of templates and basically just make yourself a way to do this all quickly. Yeah, I'm quite happy with how those couple of ones turned out. I know we didn't make too many, but that's also because I was trying to explain all of this. Let me know in the comments below what you want to see for the next video. I'm working on a pack with a lot of snare drums that's going to contain a lot of drum and bass snares, and the pack there will be at least a part of the pack will be on Patreon. I'm not entirely sure yet if the entire pack will be released through Patreon. I might release it through Black Octopus Sound and have like a selection of the pack on Patreon. Anyways, that's gonna be it for now. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments and I would love to answer them for you. If you want to come hang out in my music production Discord server, check out the invite link below the stream. Link to mini meters is in the description as well, so if you want to have these meters, you can go to the description. On my Patreon, by the way, if you want to help support me, go to my Patreon, patreon.com/ARTFX. That link is down below as well. On my Patreon, you can download a whole bunch of samples. You've got gigabytes and gigabytes of samples at this point. Presets, Ableton skins, the skin for mini meters as well, and a whole lot more will be coming there as well. That's going to be it, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.